I know, right? Just a friendly reminder for those that are in attendance, if you would like to provide a public comment this evening, please be sure we have a public comment card for you. For our committee members, you'll notice that there is a green side and a white side to your cards this evening. That's so that if you have a comment, a question, anything, and you'd like to speak, just switch it to the green. That way your co-chairs know to call upon you, and we'll do our best. Although I think Stacy's on the end, just wave. Yeah. They may not see you, so just let me know. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Actually, that's not the right.
Carol. It's not
Right, because we're not on the presentation.
Oh, okay.
Who gets the presentation?
Sorry.
Switching, a question, a comment, a concern, that way the chair knows that you're right. Oh, that's cool. We're trying. We'll see if it works. For members of the community, you'll see a QR code that will be going away shortly. On that QR code, you'll get to the agenda for tonight that has the links to all of the handouts that we'll be talking about. Thank you. Do you walk her through your registration? Yes.
Good evening, welcome everyone. It's nice to see you all here and seated and comfortable, I hope. I'm calling our meeting to order. Is that anything more formal than that?
No.
Okay. Okay, so we'll do roll call for committee members first. Stephanie Caldwell. Sarah Cameron.
Here.
Thanks. Maruja Clinze.
Here.
Thank you. Kevin Course. Jorge DeLeon.
Here.
Thank you. Evaristo Acosto. Yeah, thank you. Oscar Gomez.
Here.
Thank you. Catherine Heller. Here. Thank you. Kevin Herrera. Absent. Kristen Ippolito. Thank you. Thank you.
She's not here.
Okay, thank you. Melanie Lindsay.
Here.
Thanks. Sandy Lamelli Harrison.
Here.
Peggy Mariansky here. Sarah McLaughlin.
Here.
Kathleen Mandoga. Garafa. I should have practiced at home.
Here.
Thank you. I do apologize. Sorry. Jeanette Park.
Here.
Carol Pink.
Here.
Andrea Rodriguez.
Here.
Sydney Traub. Emmanuel Velasquez.
Here.
Annette Walters. Monica West.
Here.
And Stacy Whitaker. Okay, thank you. We are going to move to adopt tonight's agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Is that sufficient? Okay, now Marie Ann, I'm going to turn over to, oh, I beg your pardon, thank you. So the committee then will indicate approval of the adoption of the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Now we'll move to public comments. Marie Ann.
Thank you. Good evening. Based on the number of public comments we have this evening, we will give each public comment 3 minutes to speak. You'll be given a 30-second warning, and the timer will indicate when time is up. Before we begin, we would like to remind everyone that the governing board recognizes the impact that stability has on the effective operation of the district, including its role in creating a safe and positive school climate. The board understands that the First Amendment provides strong protection for speech. However, the board expects that all speech, expression, and action will follow the norms of civil behavior on district grounds and in district meetings. Please remember that we do have students who attend these meetings, so please keep language as respectful as possible. Please also remember that per the Brown Act, we need to keep public comment within the scope of the School Closures Advisory Committee. Normally I would call 2 names at a time, but we only have 1 public speaker this evening. So with that, if we can have Rebecca Fassa come up, I'm going to bring up the timer.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Fassett, and I know some of you familiar faces. I'm a teacher at Lincoln Elementary School. This is my 26th year teaching in Ventura Unified. I have taught all 26 years at Title I schools, Sheridan Way, Will Rogers, and 20 years at Lincoln. And I'm here tonight because I have some very serious concerns regarding the criterion form that you all are using. First, thank you all for being part of this process. I should have started with that. But I have some very serious concerns regarding the criterion form that you guys are using to score all the schools. When I saw a picture of the form and got to the bottom of the last 14, 15, 16 of the data points based on performance test scores for schools, I was really surprised. So I guess my first question, I know you can't answer, but I'm very curious as to why we're using test scores to measure which schools we are closing in our decision of which schools to close. I didn't think that this whole process was based on schools' performance, more so with declining enrollment, capacity, all of those issues. So that is really a huge concern tonight. I am representing all Title I elementary schools as I speak here. I know there is not a good deal of representation on this committee for our Title I elementary schools, so that is also a concern. So at Lincoln School, we have 150 students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. And it's really heartbreaking to know that based on their life circumstances, they have the potential for their school to now be closed. These are students who are already facing so much trauma in their lives, from homelessness to substance abuse. For example, at Lincoln, we service students who come from the city center, which is a transitional living facility. They're able to walk to school. These are students whose parents are recovering from substance abuse and other issues, and they come to school happy, they can walk to school. And I just want you all to remember that while you can look at numbers for test scores and data, there are lots of things on there that you cannot measure. And you cannot measure that our students at our school, they feel safe, they feel loved, they feel cared for. We give them tools, they feel challenged, and we make them want to come to school and make their lives really better. And the staff at these schools, these Title I schools, work so hard in addition to teaching standards and curriculum. We play such a different role on top of all of that. So I'd like you to really keep that all in mind. And again, I would really love to know the reason for why we are using test scores as a measure point. Thank you.
That's all the public comment we have for this evening, so we can move to the next item. Yep, right now.
Sorry, just some clarifications. It has been brought to the attention of the committee that there are spectators in the audience who are recording tonight's proceeding with video and intend to post it on various sites, whatever, to make it accessible to. So it is, I was asked to bring it to your attention as a member of the committee so that you're aware of it. And it's something that is permitted. And
It's allowable, it's completely allowable, we just wanted the community to be aware that it's potentially recorded, so no one
is surprised by it.
was surprised.
Okay, then moving on to the next part of the agenda is the consent calendar item, which is consideration of committee meetings from the last meeting in March 19th. So that was part of the packet that was made available in advance. Are there any concerns with the minutes? So then we take a oral acknowledgement. I don't have to have a motion or a second. We just move forward. We do have. Okay, okay, all right, thank you. So can I have a motion, please, to adopt the consent calendar?
So moved.
Thank you. And second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, all approved, all in agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. And yeah, now we're moving to the conference presentation of demographic data.
All right, so we have Ken Reynolds here from Schoolworks, who did our demographic study. So Ken is going to present tonight on 25-26 demographics and enrollment projections.
All right. Good evening. We're here to present the enrollment projection study that we did for the district for this school year. And so we have a quick overview of the results. Behind the actual study, we have information for every individual school. And then I'm also here to be available to answer your questions. So we always start off talking about the methodology. Our analysis, we try to give you the best accurate projections we can, although we're trying to forecast the future. So just like, someone predicting the weather, right? They're not always going to get it right, but they do their best to help us out. And so we have that same approach here. And the key data that we use to do our analysis in the first column there, you'll see we look at TK and kindergarten projections based on birth data. So we look at how many children are born in the community, and then how many of those show up in your schools 4 and 5 years later. Then that second column sort of describes our process for looking at the cohort factors or mobility factors. And basically what that is like how many third graders end up in fourth grade the following year, and so forth. And we look at that as details by school. We analyze that data based on students enrolled in your schools over the last 4 years, but we're looking at it geographically. So for all those students enrolled, we look at where they live, and so we're analyzing those local community dynamics. And then the third column on this graphic is the impact of new housing developments. As new homes are built, both single family and multifamily, there's an impact in terms of generating some new students. So we look at what we believe is the most likely timing for the occupation of those new housing units and how many students are likely to be generated. And we use all of that data. We're analyzing it for each individual school area to generate the population of children in each boundary. And then to actually look at a school enrollment projection, we have to adjust that boundary population for the students that transfer in and out of those boundaries and end up enrolling in each campus. And so all of that's sort of a quick overview of the types of analysis that we're doing. So on this slide, we illustrate in yellow the boundaries of the school district. And then all of those red dots represent where students lived this school year. And all the numbers you're going to see in our report are based on information from the first week of October. So the first week of October of this school year is showing you the location of all the children. This next slide again shows your current elementary school boundaries. You likewise have boundaries for the middle schools and high schools. And so when we're analyzing each school, we're looking at just the population that lives in those school areas, so we can understand which areas are growing or declining or are stable. So our next slide looks at the birth data. And this is looked at district-wide on this chart. The blue bars represent our historic kindergarten enrollment. And that blue line you see above it is the number of children that were born 5 years prior to that kindergarten class. So we can see the number of children being born has declined compared to where it used to be. And in the future, it is starting to drop off a little bit more as we get out to our fourth year out. And the other item that we'll notice is that the number of students enrolled in the district compared to the number of children that were born has declined slightly. And that's just telling us that either due to mobility, they're not here when school starts, or they're enrolling in other competitive options such as private schools, charter schools, or home schools. And so we're taking all that into account when we're doing our enrollment projections. And this chart is very similar, except it shows the information for our 4-year-olds, our TK classes. Again, this has been a very small class. Originally, only 3 months of births out of the 12 months of the year were allowed to enroll. And this school year was the first year all 4-year-olds were eligible to attend. So we can see over the last several years, those numbers have been increasing as the program has been expanding to all 4-year-olds. We are showing that it will likely maintain its current capture rate or participation rate. It is much less than the number of students that are enrolling in kindergarten. So there is possible for that program to expand. But again, we've seen this in many districts throughout the state where our TK classes are significantly smaller than our kindergarten, number of students enrolled in kindergarten. But again, since it's our first year, we're not 100% sure on where that direction is going. I think there is some possibilities for it to increase. But again, our history, because since TK is relatively new, right, we used to put 4-year-olds in preschools or just kept them home and they weren't in school yet. So until this becomes more widely known and more common practice, I think our numbers are going to continue low until we get more engagement. So I like this next graphic because it helps illustrate some of the numbers. And sometimes when we look at numbers, it can be a little bit challenging to understand what we're seeing. So here we're showing 2 items. One, the green bars represent our enrollment this school year back in October by grade level. So we can easily see that in the upper grades, we got a larger number of students than we do in the lower grades. So one observation is if the first grade students we have right now are the same number are the same size class once they're in high school, we're going to have a lot fewer students in high school 10 years from now.
I'm sorry, we're going to interrupt you just for a quick second. We do have a question, Sarah.
Thank you, and you may get to this, so if you're gonna tell me to pause. But
That's all right.
back to the previous graphs about your TK enrollment projection,
Yes.
are you including projections from inter-district transfers as well, or just based on the birth rate of the USD?
This includes interdistrict, yes. It includes all the children that were enrolled.
But for TK enrollment, I mean, they would be brand new to the USD if they're coming to TK. So are these predictions just based on the birth rate, or are there other factors involved?
These projections are based on the birth rate and new development activity.
Okay, but so there could be other influxes, children from other neighboring districts that want to attend here. And
Right.
that would not be accounted for.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
We're assuming it continues at its current pace. And so, I don't know what that number is off the top of my head, but let's say there were a dozen students enrolled in TK in the district's classes this school year. We would assume that there'd be a dozen next school year. So we assume it's continuing at its current ratio.
Thank you.
So yeah, if there's all of a sudden a jump of 20, then our numbers are going to be off by 20.
We have one more question, Carol?
Yes, I don't know if you have this information either, but do you know how the enrollment for TK is this year? Do we have the data? And how big the class sizes are for this year?
The number on this chart, that last blue column, does show the enrollment for this school year. We're just wrapping up from the data in October. And I don't know what today's enrollment is or what the pre-enrollment is for next year, but this was the October enrollment number.
Okay, so it was like October.
That was the census data that you used. Correct.
But did she also have a question about the class size?
20.
TK.
20.
Sorry. Yeah, so per CE guidance, the ratio is 1 to 10 in TK. So those class sizes, the max class size is 20, assuming that there are 2 adults in the classroom.
If you can, go ahead.
All right, so the other item illustrated on this chart are those blue boxes ran across the top. What that is illustrating is our kindergarten enrollment when each of these grades started kindergarten. So if you look at our senior class, the number of children currently in that class is almost identical to the number that started kindergarten. So it's just showing us what the impacts are over time. So if we see that the green bars are lower than the blue boxes, it's telling us our classes dropped a little bit since they started kindergarten, which we see that for our 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. When we look at most of our elementary grades were almost identical to our starting enrollment as our current enrollment. And for our 9th grade and 11th grade, we're actually currently quite a bit larger than our starting enrollment. So again, it's just showing you the net impact over time. And of course, it can be a little bit challenging to say, okay, so we're always going to have fewer 6th, 7th, and 8th graders than we started with, and that's not necessarily true. Again, it's easy to draw conclusions from this, but it's not necessarily correct, because one of the challenges that everyone in our state faced was the pandemic, 6 years ago now. And so those impacts were a one-time impact. And so it can cause some shifts in the imagery here that might make us want to draw some conclusions. But in general, the better information is illustrated in the actual individual projections, where we're taking the history of the last 4 years and projecting that forward. And so, but again, I think it's still good to understand what we're seeing here, and overall, the district has a great retention rate in its students. And we're not seeing this effect where, you know, if we started with 1,000, we only have 500 now, right? We're losing students. That's not what's happening here. Overall, we're doing very good on retaining them. The problem is, you can see how many kindergartners we used to have when our senior class started, compared to how many we have now when our current kindergarten class started. And so there's just fewer children being born and fewer children ending up in our schools in kindergarten that are causing the declines that we've seen and are going to see. Then our next slide talks about the information on new housing developments. And so again, we work with the planning department, we work with developers, the planning commission, to understand what's being planned for the future. It is a very challenging projection to make. The housing market has been very soft with the high interest rates. We're not sure where things are heading from here, so we are a little bit on the conservative side in the first couple of years. We're only projecting 156 homes being occupied for year 1, and then 177 for year 2. And then by the time we get out to years 5 and 6, we're back to an average of just over 300. And so we are anticipating the housing market improving, but we're taking it at a conservative pace, so we don't over-project in our numbers.
I'm sorry, Andrea.
Yes.
Yes, I noticed that in your housing demographics, you excluded studios and 1-bedroom apartments, and that leads me to have some serious questions, because I know a number of families that actually live in 1-bedroom apartments and just make it work because the cost of living is very expensive here. So I'm curious, one, why did you choose to exclude those? And then I'm also curious where, some of these projects, I noticed, like, you're projecting that Lincoln is actually going to increase in enrollment, whereas I expected it would have gone down because, the cost of living in apartments and housing and stuff in this area is very expensive. And how are you factoring in things like, maybe these are just apartments and townhouses that are only going to appeal to, retirees or young people that don't even want to have kids? Like, so how are you factoring those kinds of things into your projections?
Yeah, that's a significant challenge. again, it's not a significant amount of development. And so we didn't have to dive into, when we have thousands of units being planned in a community, we can actually do a deeper dive. When we have these types of numbers, again, our key factor is, these are averages. When we look at the student yield rate, which I was going to mention next, shown on the right-hand side of this chart, the average number of students living in each home as of the 2020 census 6 years ago was shown here as 0.344 students. Our projections are much more conservative at 0.275 because we're aware of the higher housing costs, and that has driven down the average number of children living in units. Again, that average, when factored across the numbers of units we have here, is not generating a significant number of children, but it does have an impact. And so we're going to account for the types of units that typically just has workers. That's why we excluded, when possible, the studios or one bedrooms. Now, I know that there are plenty of examples where there will be some families living in those, but the majority, we assume, would not be occupied by families. Now, on the other hand, we also assume if it's a senior development, that we are not going to include those either because they're not supposed to have children. Now, I've seen children show up in those types of units. Obviously, there are situations that arise. But again, those are the assumptions that we build into it, that there's always going to be exceptions. And, it's not an easy task. And with these low yield rates, it does account for the fact that, we're not anticipating much in terms of families. Now, I know that when there's affordable units, we get much higher yield rates. And so if we were aware of a significant number of affordable units, we also do account for that by using a higher yield rate for those types of projects.
Okay, Roshan, you had a question?
What was the source document for your new development construction metrics?
I don't think there's a single source document. Again, we look at information from the planning department, we review planning commission reports, we talk to developers, we reach out to all the developers that we're aware of that have projects coming from our review of the planning commission and working with the planning department. So again, we're having these conversations and collecting data and then using our common sense and understanding how to interpret all the sources of data we have into what we believe is a realistic assumption to make for our enrollment projections.
Would we be able to confirm if the city's housing element annual progress reports were used as part of that data?
I believe so. I'd have to check with my staff.
Okay, thank you.
And Jorge?
When we're looking at the schools that you have listed here, there's in the high school, you're not including Foothill. Is there a specific reason why that was not included?
For the high schools, we're looking at for all these schools, you're identifying the boundary areas. And so any schools that do not have a boundary area, we look at the overall impacts based on their percentage of the students that enroll in their school. So all development has an opportunity to impact the non-boundary schools.
Jorge, would you mind flipping your card back around? Otherwise, I'll keep calling on you.
We need like little lights.
So when we, again, use all this methodology for all the individual school campuses, we sum all those together, and this illustrates the overall summary of our results. The first set of columns here on the left-hand side represent our enrollment history, and the right 6 columns represent our projections over the next 6 years. The orange color represents our elementary school grades, TK through 5. The green color represents our middle schools, grades 6 through 8. And blue represents grades 9 through 12. And so we can see over the last 10 years, the enrollment has been overall declining. And when we look over the next 6 years, we're continuing to see a similar declining rate. So that's a quick overview of the results of our projections when we look at it district-wide. We do have a lot more details in our report for every school. We show a map of that school boundary. We show an attendance map matrix that illustrates the students on that map. They're color-coded by different colors. Red represents if they live in that school's boundary and attend that school. If you see blue dots on that chart, they live in that school's boundary but attend a different school or program within the district. And then you'll see some yellow dots on that map. Those are students that live outside that school's boundary but are attending that school. And then we also have a green dot for any inter-district students that are coming in from outside the district. And then we also have the chart on the right-hand side that will illustrate for each school those attendance patterns coming in and out, but also by which school they're coming in from or going to. So it's illustrating our attendance pattern information. And that's not based on actual records that the district holds. Hopefully they align well with that, but it's simply based on where a student lives compared to where they're enrolled. And then additionally for each school, we will illustrate their enrollment projections. And there's some additional information on this. It probably may be a bit useful for this committee. The red line on this is the information we've been talking about, the school's enrollment history and enrollment projection. The blue line you will see on here represents the number of children that live in their boundary. So for example, here at Lincoln, we can see that blue line is a little bit higher than that red line. So there's a net transfer out. And again, in districts that have some alternative programs, it's quite common to see transfers out, especially as we get to the upper grades, especially like when you were talking with Foothill.
And can I stop you for a second? I just want to make note that these slides with this type of data, it's going to be really useful when we start looking at the scoring, when we get to the scoring at the end. If you pay attention where it says total CR capacity for, let's just say for Lincoln, is 329. That's referring to the classroom capacity at the site, including the portables. And then when you look at on the right-hand side, it says permanent classroom capacity. That's just the brick and mortar buildings. And so those numbers, along with that 31, 32 column projection, you're going to see those. And this is some of the data that we're using for the criterion that we're looking at today, criterion 1 through 6. So just when we get to that point, these are the documents you use as like a checkpoint. Okay. I do need the committee to check to make sure that everything looks correct.
Right, and I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, before you go on, I can't read that far. Is it Catherine?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I have a question regarding the map. So when it says outgoing to other schools, does that mean outgoing to other schools within our district or just outgoing or living within that boundary but don't attend that boundary?
They're living within that boundary, but attend a different school in the district. Because again, all the student data we have is from the enrollment within your school district. Yeah, and so
Can you put your card?
So as was previously mentioned, the other two lines on this chart represent our permanent classroom capacity and our total classroom capacity, including portables. Sometimes those lines will be the same number if there's no portables on campus. And the classroom capacity was based on the number of classrooms that are usable on the campus times the number of children that we aim to house in each classroom, and those loading standards are identified on the bottom part of this page. And so we are loading those TK classes at 20 students per classroom and grades K through 3 at 24.
And where are you getting those loading criteria from, like how do you determine that's what you should load a class for?
Well, the 20 and the 24 are the state guidelines. And then the rest are just what the district, I think, contract or goals are for the upper grades. All right, then we have this attendance matrix. I expect none of you will be able to read it up on the screen because there's a lot of data on this. And again, this is just showing the elementary schools. But all the parents that live in the community, right, they can go to their local school, elementary school, and for this chart, or if they choose, right, they can ask to go to a different school, or they can apply to go somewhere else. And in some cases, we may be forced. I don't know if we have any situations where, you know, if there's no special ed offered at this school, but it's offered at a different campus, right, then they might be transferring for that reason. If all the first grade classes were full, so we ended up going to a neighboring school where there was room in a first grade class. There's transfers for lots of different reasons and lots of different purposes. So this just shows us how that information all comes together, at least as of the first week of October during this school year. So again, it's quite normal to see a significant number of children go to a school different than the closest neighborhood school that they live in. So this is just illustrating that. And it's, again, for this committee, I think it might be useful from a perspective. There's two types of situations we can look at, right? One is, it's quite common to look at the school with the lowest enrollment and saying, well, if we consider that school, we're not impacting that many students if that school closes. And that's, you know, just a simple observation. But the other thing to look at is, well, how many students lived in that boundary? Because that's the true number being impacted. Because if there's 100 students leaving a certain campus to go to different campuses, well, they're no longer going to have that homeschool as an option anymore. So it's good to understand those details. It becomes a challenge if we're considering closing a school that has a lot of transfers in. Then, in addition to the students that live in that boundary, all those that were transferring in now have to go somewhere else. And so the impacts can have some domino effects. And so I think it's good to look at this to understand the implications as we study the different options that are going to be looked at.
Ken, do you mind explaining, starting from the left, intra-ins, intra-outs, inflows and outflows to the committee, that we not look at this on a daily basis, what that means?
Yeah, how to read this chart a little bit better. So across the top are listed our schools of attendance. So that's all of our elementary schools. And so if you look at a particular school and you look down that column, that shows all the students enrolled in at that campus. And so by looking at that, of course, the first line shows us how many schools are enrolled in that school that come from outside the district. And then every other line below that shows us where those students are living and where they're coming from. And so you will notice that the majority of the kids that typically come into a campus are coming from their own boundary, but several have a significant number of transfers in. And then the other way of looking at this chart is by looking at all the names down that left-hand side column. If we look at the school names there, that's the school boundary information we're looking at. So you can look at any one school boundary and go across and look at where those kids are going to school that live in that boundary. So it's in two different ways. If you want to understand where the kids are coming from, you find your school name across the top. If you want to see where the kids are going to school from different areas within the district, you look at the school boundary name on the left-hand column and then can look across to see where they go to school. Then we summarize it at the bottom. The total number of intra-ins and intra-outs. And intra just means they live in the district and are coming in and out of schools. Whereas the inter means they don't live in the district, but they're coming in. And so we're showing the total percentages. I feel about what, 48%. That's a significant number of students choosing to go to schools different than the boundaries they live in. But again, when you have a district that's diverse, a lot of different options for programs, it's not uncommon to see significant numbers like this. When we have very similar matrices for the middle schools and high schools in our presentation. So that the next page shows the middle schools, a lot easier to read because there's a lot fewer middle schools. We do have the K-8 schools, and so their information is also shown on here for their grade, their middle school students.
So for like Lemon Grove, the K-8, they're shown on the other slide, that's just their K-5, and this, on this slide, this would represent their 6th to 8th grade.
Correct. And so again, we had about 43% net inflow here. And then for the high schools, right across the top, we're showing 5 different schools and programs. But then when you look down the left-hand column, right, we have those inter-district students, just under 400 of them. But we've got the 2 comprehensive high school boundaries. About 2,100 students living in the one boundary and nearly 2,300 in the other boundary. So when it comes to a program like Foothill, you're able to see like how many live in the Buena High boundary versus how many live in the Ventura High boundary. So again, it's just very illustrative of the different dynamics. Now, a lot of times we will notice that attendance patterns will relate to the distance to campus. Obviously, that would not be a factor for any virtual programs, but lots of different information and different ways to analyze it as different options are being considered. And a question was asked, so we wanted to include information on inter-district transfer trends. So this is showing, based on the 4 years of data we have, by grade level, how many students are enrolled in your school district that live outside the school district. So we do see that there are more students coming into the schools in the upper grades compared to the lower grades. It's just a slightly upward trend. When we look at it compared to over the school years, the numbers have declined just slightly in terms of the total number. And when looking at it as a percentage, it's also had a slight drop off. This next chart summarizes all the schools, the total enrollment by school over the next 6 years, and it also shows the current enrollment, the current and 6-year projections. I usually like showing this one to the school boards because it summarizes at the bottom, right, what our challenges are each school year. So again, we're seeing about a loss of 250 students by this next fall. Those numbers, again, some years are a little bit less than others, some are a little bit more than others. And if we're graduating a very large senior class, we're going to see a larger drop. If we're graduating a smaller senior class, then the decline will look a little smaller that year. And then the final real useful page, as we look at this data, is our utilization chart. It's not anything new that you didn't see already. It's just summarizing it and showing us our current enrollment versus our 6-year projection. And that last 2 columns are color-coded. We're taking the enrollment divided by the capacity. And this is using the total capacity.
Total meaning you're including the portables as well.
Correct. And so we use a color code of blue to represent schools that have plenty of space available. If they're at 60% utilization or less. We'll use a green color if you're in the 80% range, which is sort of our ideal range, because we'll have room for students that may show up, and we're not worried about having to send students to neighboring schools because we're too impacted. Whereas we see the orange color there for in the 90s, and we highlight with a red box any schools projected to be over 100%. And then the yellow color is our 70% range. They're saying we're sort of below our ideal range, but have a little bit of room for more students before we reach that ideal 80% goal. And again, this is just a projections based on all the current data and information we have. We keep getting additional birth data every year as it becomes available. Statewide, those trends have been down. We used to have 600,000 births a year in our state. Now, this past year, we were just around 400,000. So we've lost 1/3 of the births over the last 15 years or so. So it's been a significant decline. We don't know where that's going to go from here, but again, we continue monitoring those numbers. Again, the housing market is very difficult to predict right now. So we're gonna have to watch what happens with the economy and the housing market. That could have some positive or negative impacts on the overall numbers. And so the rest of the pages in here, again, show the enrollment projections for each individual school/program. And really love to be able to answer any questions you might have. And again, I know we're right at the beginning stages of this whole process. One of the items as the demographer for the district, as you come across different recommendations you may want to consider, we're able to develop options or plans or analyze those thoughts in terms of, if you were selecting a particular campus or thinking this might be a good campus to consider for closure, we can go in and dive into the boundary analysis to see if, right, ideally you have already looked to say, oh, the neighboring schools have adequate space for those students, but we can dive into it also to see if it is a workable scenario that we were looking at it from our geographic perspectives.
Thank you, Ken. The committee has questions. Ken is here. We have any other questions for Ken? The remaining documents, they'll come in handy for the committee to look at when we look at the scoring criteria and start reading it, just to do a spot check or double check, make sure 31, 32 enrollment numbers are correct and the capacity numbers are matching.
Okay, looks like we have a few questions. I'm sorry I didn't see who was first, but Maruja?
Hi, Sarah and I actually were looking at numbers and we just, and maybe this was what, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, the gentleman that just stated. Thank you, Hassan. Capacity questions, because we're looking at Anacapa Middle School specifically, according to slide 17, has a total classroom capacity of 1,211. But at the last session, we looked at the capacity of 942 for Anacapa. So I'm wondering, is that the permanent classrooms only? That's what the 942, because I know there's 6 portable. Does that reflect the 1,200 or?
So the maps that you guys were given last time, those were taken from the long range master plan,
Okay.
which was like done
Years ago. Yeah, okay.
probably. And so that was just meant to give you a high level like visual of what the campus would look like. But the data that Ken went over, facilities departments redoes the classroom capacity report every year. So he's looking at the most up to date.
Got it. So refer to these for the
Refer
numbers.
to these.
Awesome. Thank you so much for clarifying.
That's good clarification. And Catherine?
Yeah, I'm sorry if you already mentioned this, but looking at also slide 17, classroom capacity versus utilization in the future, are we looking at classrooms as they are used now? As classrooms with pupils, are you also including classrooms that are used as pullouts or other kinds of sensory rooms or things like that?
It's going to be somewhere in between the two. I understand that as a school, as you've been facing declining enrollment over the last 10 years or more, you end up with empty spaces and you make use of those spaces. So we're not only counting what's currently has your teachers in them, we are looking at a larger number in most cases, simply because we want what's a reasonable number. We do not want to take away all those special needs spaces, pull-out spaces and such, but we want to use a reasonable number of those spaces. So we try to find a good compromise between them. What the maximum is and what a reasonable number is.
And then our next presentation consultation with facilities, we have Marina in the back, her team put together a classroom usage report. They'll be going into a deep dive of what classrooms are included and what library spaces were excluded, like we're going to turn those into classrooms, so she'll be able to explain to you next meeting as far as which classrooms were included and excluded. Okay. She'll be right back. That's all right.
Any other questions? Any other questions for Ken? I don't think so. So you want to move on to the next part?
Yeah.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, maybe we should take a quick 10-minute break. Yeah.
I hear a lot of thank yous, so I think so. So we'll come back at 6:40.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Honestly, it happens to me every so often. But it doesn't. Final draft. She did like a rough draft. Hi, it was so nice to see you. Yeah. Standing up for our kids. Oh, yeah. Yeah. There was another fellow we knew from here in middle schools. I'm like, Joe, should that many middle schoolers be in one place? It's when I think about it, it's like, that makes sense too. Yeah. Well, I mean, we all know it's like good on my that I can sort of see anticipating. Do you see that like as the year every quarter gets worse towards the end of the year. Yeah. And then you just get one to stop blowing up their lights and then the next one starts doing the refusal to go by. Yeah. That's not usual. Right? Yes. Exactly. It's just that's why when I out, yeah, like even stricter. So I mean, I'm not being yeah. And he's retired. Well, I retired. My husband got terminal cancer, so it's been not the retirement that I anticipated. Yeah, thanks. I know it's never what you think is going to happen. No, 6 months after we had 6 months. Yeah, that we did, our thing, and we did do it well. We did it hard, and we did it well. But he's in the mission now. But he's still my child will have their ladder. They might not take the put it in their backpack. And so we're leaving next week. If there's an emergency, my child mission, and I'm thinking travel. If there's, so you loaded up on all these bags. What they need is like, You're going to be the literal death of your child.
Pretty accessible.
Because we'll call them or text them and you will give them away. Exactly. And that's right. To survive
Getting
on
back
a
to
cell
the
phone.
game,
You
so,
won't contact
so
your child.
doing
You're gonna
something
get
like
arrested.
this is actually like a good thing because it gives me so yeah, it feels really nice.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, what if I need to? And I. Or call 911 or 911, but no. I should be able to help you.
Because you know, we also have a lot of vested
I'm sorry I haven't written any of that. Oh, that's okay. If you need me to, let me know. That's all right. I know it's a hard time. Well, you know, just keep doing. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, yeah, no, my pleasure. It's nice to see you. Nice to see you.
I don't know that how yeah.
That's the last thing I do. I want to just.
I wanted to say hi. Skipped out. Oh, okay.
I might have a.
Yeah. Actually, I won't be here now. Thank you. Thanks. I know. I hope this is either like a fool's errand. It's like, oh, okay. I don't know if this is gonna be okay. Yeah. We gotta give it a go. We've done some little ones.
I wish that they checked. Oh, I see. I'm gonna get devices. I wish they had checked where it can't be right. Yeah. And then they could get it down at night. As they destroy more Chromebooks, then in both other elementary high schools. That's why I want to fund 4 Chromebooks. They just crash them. I was on charge of their Chromebooks.
Well, you know, older men. Well, no, you did actually. Sample pills to improve your all this stuff. So he did all of that. But it's like, yeah, no, we haven't. So glad you went to things like help them run business decisions. Yeah. Pay attention. Don't skip your steps. Oh, excuse me. Ken said he spoke with you. Yeah. He was very funny. Yeah, it was so and he remembered you clearly, right? Just like you during Yeah. Well, you're clearly a simple-minded person.
Very careful.
There you go.
like your shirt? I mean, I'm.
Well, okay, hold on. Yeah.
And this is like, I think we're putting it together to make it cut, you know. Oh, no. So she. I'm like. But I tried, it's actually wonderful. It was a process. It's so nice seeing you all the time. We have our teacher on my camera. Someone did so they're not. Look at oh, and he doesn't.
Yeah. What do you want? I know. I would actually love to dive in. Got it.
What's happening in the different areas of but also like it's almost like it is.
Okay, we're ready to resume. If we take your seats, please. Dewey cookies, I do them for you. Okay, perfect. There's some papers coming around that will support the next part of our program. Before we continue though, there has been a request from the members of the committee to have audience members please sit quietly in the audience so that we can stay focused on what's happening in the discussion at committee level. And if you have a conversation that needs to carry on or needs to be extensive, maybe step out into the hallway, please. Okay, thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to the scoring and ranking of school sites. Hassan will take over the conversation from here, please.
All right, so.
I'm sorry?
Hassan, which presentation or do you want any of these?
Yes, you can put them up. It should be, so the committee members that Vicky's passing out right now, criteria 1 through 6. And we'll walk through each criteria, try to explain what you're looking at and what it means. And we'll answer any questions. Just have to preface this by saying each criteria is information only, right? No one criteria is gonna make a decision here, so just keep that in mind. We have 23 criteria to look at. We're looking at the first 6, and each criteria will provide a specific piece of information that could be helpful for this committee or could not be helpful for this committee. But we'll go through it one at a time. So criteria 1, did everybody got everything? Okay, so criteria 1, and it'll be helpful if you had the presentation prior, where I was kind of highlighting where we got the numbers from. And so criterion 1, each criteria has 2 different things going on. So the first criteria, you'll see that you can either get a score of 1 or 2, and that is based off of just looking at the utilization rate and looking at if the enrollment falls below 70% of the capacity. And if it does, it's a 2 for a yes and 1 for a no. So that's in that column. And then the next column over that says ranking at the far right, that is done with just looking at the 31-32 enrollment, and it's ranking it based off the highest rank, meaning the highest number, like 1 through 17 if we're looking at the elementary schools. So if you take a look at number 17, look at Lincoln, right? For this specific criteria, it's saying that Lincoln Elementary is ranking the highest at number 17 because their projected enrollment at 31-32 is at 245. And the flip side to that, if you look at number 1, which is Mound, their projected enrollment at 31-32 fiscal year is at 517. And so that is what that column is doing. And so if the committee could take a few minutes, take it in, ask me questions that can clarify. Once again, the 31-32 projected enrollment is taken from Ken Reynolds' demographic presentation. You guys have the individual slides at the back end that give you that school information. The capacity here, we're looking at the total capacity, so that includes permanent classrooms and modulars or portables. And then the utilization rate is just looking at the 2 and dividing it, and you'll get 42.16%. So once again, the score, 1, you get a 1 or 2. A 2 means yes in this specific category if your enrollment is projected to fall below 70% of capacity. And then the ranking in this criteria is just looking at 31-32 projected enrollment and ranking the school according to that. Before we move on, I don't want to go too fast here, just
Hassan, we do have a question.
yes.
Melanie Lindsay.
So I'm not understanding. So if we look at Pierpont, for example, its enrollment in 31-32 is potentially 303 kids, and it can hold 303 kids. So it's at 100% capacity, but it's ranked number 11.
So the rank score is only based off of the projected enrollment, right? So it's not looking at the utilization rate. The utilization rate is looking at just the score of 1 or 2, saying, is this school below 70% of capacity, yes or no? And that tells this criteria will tell you that that specific school is underutilizing the site or not. And for the ranking in this specific criteria, it's just looking at the projected enrollment and ranking it in order of which school has the highest enrollment and the lowest enrollment.
Total number of students,
Yes.
is what you're getting at.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is just who has the most and who has the least.
No.
Okay.
So it's a smaller total.
That's why each criteria has like 2 different things that it's looking at, and it's giving you 2 different pieces of information.
Okay, got it.
Have that cleared up. Are you indicating you have a question, Ken?
I'm sorry,
That's all good.
I'm the numbers guy. I think I found a mistake. Where you're at, I don't understand something. I was looking at Mound. You show 77% utilization, but you gave them a score of 2.
You're absolutely right. That should be a 1.
Yeah.
So if you
Mound
see
should
any
be a 1,
school
not a
in the
2.
utilization rate column, if it is below 70%, then it would be a 2. And so what Ken pointed out, Mound, it says 77%, that actually should be a 1.
We'll make sure that when we put these on the website with the summaries, that all of the changes that you all make, whatever you come to consensus on before we put them up there, have these changes in them. So please give us a couple of days to do so.
That's why we need to take some time with this criteria, like put your eyes on it and walk it through. I looked at this thing like 50 times and I still this. So.
Can you explain on the far right then, the permanent capacity with the C, utilization rate, how?
Yeah, so that's not playing a factor into this scoring criteria, that's just extra information for the Oh, so sorry, the permanent capacity is just your brick and mortar buildings. Once again, for the ranking and this criteria is just looking at that 31, 32 enrollment. Yeah, so permanent capacity is brick and mortar, and capacity is everything including brick and mortar plus the portables. So if we go to take a look at an example of the middle schools, you're looking at all of them are essentially below 70%, so they all get a 2. And then the schools with the lowest enrollment here, Deanne's middle school is ranking the highest 4, followed by Anacapa, and then you have Balboa, and then Cahuilla Middle School. And then for the high schools, we have, since we're not looking at Gwinnett and Ventura, those are just not applicable. And then for the high schools, you're looking at Pacific ranking number 3 as compared to it has the lowest enrollment, and El Camino, and then Foothill ranking number 1. So 3 meaning Pacific has the lowest projected enrollment. It's the highest rank in that category. And so if you look at the other column, Foothill is utilizing 88% of its capacity, its projected enrollment capacity. And then same with El Camino, and Pacific has an enrollment, it's only utilizing 26.37%. So that's how that's scoring. We're all okay on this. Just remember, this is once again not a deciding factor. Each criteria will just give you bits and pieces of information. So this one is telling you the percentage of enrollment to capacity and how the schools are ranking based off of their projected 31, 32 enrollment. We'll move on to the next criteria if no one has questions. So criteria number 2 is looking at 2 things here. So it's looking at the demographically diverse population based on the unduplicated pupil percentage. And so the unduplicated pupil percentage is once again, like it makes up your low income, foster, homeless, and English learners. And so that's the percentage that they're looking at. And so essentially if a school site's taking a look at where you fall in, like if you have a high unduplicated percentage, like a 90%, that means your school site, it's not geographically diverse. Its demographic is, it's highly populated with students that are, or families that are low income or foster youth or English learners, as compared to the flip side of it. If you have like a 10% unduplicated count, then you have families that don't fall into that category. And so we are looking at a range from 40 to 60%. And if you're falling within that range, you'll get a 1 score for a yes and a 2 for a no. So within 40 to 60%, meaning you're capturing the demographic that has both, that has a good mix of like low income and affluent families. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly. And so as we look down, in the scoring column, it's either 1, meaning yes, you're falling within that range, or a 2 if you're not. Please double check that.
And how did the range of 40 to 60%?
You want to answer that? Or I can take that. So this rubric was established by school services. So, like, I mean, if you just think about it, like as a district, we are like 58%. And so we have a good mixture. So if you look at our district throughout, you have a good mix of both sides of the population. And so that number is, that's where that range came from. It's just 40 to 60%. You'll have a good mix of both categories. I think you can categories or both sides of the demographics. Yeah.
But if you're looking at middle schools, for example, if ANCAP is 66, Balboa is 60, and data is 75%, that means that our population has a lot of unduplicated students across the board.
Yeah.
Right?
60%.
So is 40 to 60 a fair assessment then?
I think as we went through this with School Services California, like that, the concept of fair, right, is a judgment. Like, does it seem right or wrong? That we have to move away from like fairness for a moment, right? There's a criteria. So the criteria, it's just by the definition, and this is where like we attribute certain things to these demographics, and we have to just momentarily pause that and pull two things simultaneously through. The way that we're being asked, you are being asked as a committee to look at this, is in some ways also counterintuitive to the way that we've traditionally in schools used the term demographic diversity, right? So put those things on hold and let's just look at Atlas K-8 together, right? So you have Atlas K-8, the unduplicated percentage, and again, we're going to use this term a lot, so we'll repeat it several times. Unduplicated pupil percent, so UPP, unduplicated pupil percentage, it constitutes 3 groups. So it's your low income, it's your English learners, and foster youth. So that in itself has a bit of diversity, right? So then if you think about that, that's one group. So at Atlas, currently, it's not currently, in the column, the score column, that unduplicated percentage is 59.64%. So that is in itself, there's some diversity just in that one statistic. Now, when we look at the next column, you have the variance from 50%. So if 50% of the population were to be that kind of, that population in the diversity that comes with that, the next column is just measuring the difference from 50% of them. That's all it is. It's not a judgment. It's just saying that at Atlas, that the UPP percentage is 9.64 greater than 50%. That's all it's saying. So that's why when it says the variance from 50%, it's 9.64. It's just noting that there's a 9.64 difference above 50%. And then back to the scoring. So the score, Atlas here has a score of 1. And if we go back to the top left column, in that little box, the top left column, you'll see that the demographically diverse population based on the unduplicated pupil percentage within the range of 40 to 60%. Right. So because Atlas falls within that 40 to 60% range, if it does, we give it a yes score of 1. So that's why it has a score of 1, because it's within that range. Then the last part is the ranking, which is now you just go back to, you put those numbers aside, and you go back to just that strict unduplicated percentage, and now you're just taking those schools that have a higher unduplicated percentage versus those schools that have a lower unduplicated percentage, and you're just setting them against one another. So if you take a look at Sheridan Way, the unduplicated pupil percentage is at 96.48. And so the ranking is 17 because it is the school that has the highest unduplicated percent of all the schools. Okay, and so that's
I mean, essentially, if you're looking at being diverse, you would want a good mix of both. And so what this is saying is that Sheridan Way has the majority of their demographic breakup is made up of that category of population, which is low income, foster youth. And
So I guess a better way to phrase it would then be, is our percentage skewed? Because those numbers, when you go then to middle school, looks really high on the unduplicated population, but it doesn't, like 3 or 4 schools don't fit inside the 40 to 60. So is that 40 to 60 a skewed range for the population we have in our district?
Yeah, really good point. Is it skewed? It depends, right? We can always move that measurement. This was just the measurement that School Services of California is giving us as a criteria. After we do the ranking, then that's when we make a meaning of it, right? What does it mean?
Okay.
But no matter what, like even if we moved it to 20 to 40%, or we moved it from 60 to 80%, right? Either way, there's an argument that could be made that there's a skewedness factor wherever you place that line,
Okay.
which is why it's close basically to the middle, right? If you think about if 50% is the average, you're taking a little bit of variance to be a little bit less than that, and a little bit more, you're taking 10% on each side. And so it's that if we were getting into like normal curves, you would just have that normal curve right in the middle, a little bit less, a little bit more. And that said, like I said the first time we met, I recognize that we are very attuned to what these things mean, like what it means to be a school. It seems counterintuitive to say a school like Sheridan Way that has diversity, when you think about the diversity that comes with a high unduplicated percentage, that means you have a lot of students with a lot of needs, and so it seems diverse. But when you're looking at that from an unduplicated percentage versus everyone else, and anyone else that doesn't meet the criteria of being an unduplicated students, it has less diversity. And so it's a shift in the way that we typically use this terminology. That's what it means. So it's taking that percentage of unduplicated percentages versus non-unduplicated percentages. And so that's the comparison that we're being asked to do.
it's just one criteria.
And yeah, and we'll keep saying that over and over, but I do want to acknowledge that it's, keep acknowledging there are values that we have in belief systems around these numbers. And so it's hard to say, oh, that makes it somehow less demographically diverse. In this case, the diversity and the demographic diversity is captured in the unduplicated percent. And you're comparing that percent versus non-unduplicated students. That's what we're doing. And thank you for that. Like keep asking these questions, because we have to come to terms with just the criteria, so that way we can keep moving forward and making meaning of it. So thank you for doing that.
All right, thank you, Jose. Jorge, thank you, pardon. I really can't read that far.
I don't blame you, I can't, anyhow, I'm gonna put it back just so I don't get in trouble.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can't get past how much weight we have to put into some of these campuses that are K through 8. And because I know that we have 3 grades there that would be considered part of the middle school and so forth. So for example, Atlas, and not necessarily with this specific to this criteria, but in the overall scheme of things, how much is a campus affected by having the additional 3 grades when we're looking at this information? And I'm just curious if it's skewing the numbers, or if it's tilted one way, or I'm just wondering if there's any effect to those 3 campuses that do have the K through 8.
I have one thing where I'm aware of where it could be skewed, but I want to defer to Ken in terms of like the demographics and the way the information is presented. Can you think of any areas where the committee should have a particular awareness to how the data is represented and how it could again, skew or weight some trends or ideas that apply to K-8s differently? I have one, but why don't you go ahead?
And the obvious impact of a K-8 is, right, it has, is likely to have more students enrolled because it offers more grades. So more students within that community are able to enroll, which would, depending on that, I haven't looked at all the criteria yet, but obviously you get a higher enrollment. Again, I'm not familiar with what types of facilities they have for those middle school age children. But if they have the correct facilities, then obviously they might have even higher capacity on those sites also. So if they have more students and more capacity, I don't think that would impact their utilization rate, perhaps. But again, so far I don't think it would unfairly impact these numbers, unless there's a consideration that, that program is going to change. Then obviously that could skew things.
Thank you for that. The other thing that seems relevant, but it'll, like always, apply to each of the different criteria, is looking at the number of students versus the percent. And I think we should be aware of that, because especially if you look at, like we were just a moment ago looking at Atlas. Atlas's enrollment in 6 through 8, relatively speaking, is very small, right? So if you look at that from a numbers perspective, and be aware, like, oh, if we're looking at 6 through 8 from a capacity perspective and the numbers perspective, depending upon the application, it says one thing. But then when we start to look at percentages of that number, and if it's like 70 or 80% or 15 or 20%, I think we always just need to be reminded to go back to, well, what is the number? What is the actual effect? And so just to be aware that the percentages, in particular in places like Atlas, where you have a smaller number of 6 through 8 students, just to be mindful of that. I think that's one place where, as I was going through this analysis, I wanted to make sure that I was catching myself in there.
All right, do we feel comfortable moving on to the next criteria? Not much. Thumbs up, we're ready to move on? Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, so criteria 3 is looking at just your permanent capacity. Once again, permanent capacity is your brick and mortar buildings, right? So this is a different look at enrollment. So you have 31, 32 enrollment. You have your permanent capacity, and then you're subtracting those two to see what is the excess capacity available. And then you're scoring it to 1, it doesn't have excess capacity, and 2 meaning yes, that it does have excess capacity. And then the ranking on this is highest rank goes to the school with the most excess capacity, ranking down. So if you look at Portola, right, their projected enrollment is at 385 at fiscal year 31-32. Their permanent capacity is at 744. And so you subtract those two, you get 359 excess capacity. So they're ranked as the highest rank, meaning they have the most excess capacity compared to the other schools. And as you look at the flip side, Pierpont, right? Its permanent capacity, brick and mortar buildings is only 227. Their projected enrollment at 31-32 is 303. So they have no capacity available at Pierpont. And so if you look.
Oh, Armand, do we have a question? Stephen?
I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that the mound should be a number 1 instead of a number 2. It has negative 57 excess capacity, so that should be a 1.
Oh. Sorry, Cindy, you're talking about the score or the ranking?
Yes, the score, sorry.
Okay.
So that's.
Yes, that should be a 1, yes. So if we go to the middle schools,
I'm sorry, Sarah, is your question about this criteria before we move on? Okay, let's do that first. I just want to verify why portables are being excluded. Is it because they do wear out after time and you don't want to replace them?
so the other criteria, it's just taking a different lens to it, right? So you look, the other previous criteria, you looked at total classroom capacity. Here you're looking at just brick and mortars, but yes, your thought is exactly right. It's because portables can be moved. It could also be demolished, destroyed, probably rehab. And so we're just looking at, in fiscal year, this criteria specifically is looking at projected enrollment at fiscal year 31-32. Do you have enough brick and mortar classes to, if you have looking at the excess capacity?
And criteria 1 included the portables.
Yeah.
I'll just add to that, one of the reasons that you want both as you go through this process is, just as Hassan said, that this is projected for 2031, 2032 enrollment. Between now and then, just like every year, the portable capacity can change across the campuses. So the variability between now and 2132, that portable capacity likely is going to change across multiple campuses, which is why you still need like one stabilizing factor. One, those, just as Hassan said, those portables can be not everywhere, but just about anywhere. But you also want to be able to look at that from a stability factor. Okay, regardless of where the portables are, what would be the brick and mortar capacity for that school?
So just going down, if you go look at the middle schools, they're all scored 2s, they all have excess capacity, and then they're ranked accordingly. Nyanza Middle School with the highest excess capacity, and so forth. And then Balboa, and Anacapa, and Cabrillo with the least excess capacity. And for the high schools, we put an NA for Buena and Ventura, but essentially you're looking at Pacific ranking number 3 with the highest excess capacity, and then Foothill, then El Camino for this specific criteria. And El Camino has permanent capacity of 0 because they're all portables. They're like 89 portables.
Do we want more time with this criteria? Are we ready to move on? You need thumbs up, feel like we're ready to move on? Yeah, okay. Are we good? Okay.
Okay, so criteria 4 is taking a look at our 25, 26 intra and inter-district transfers. So the sheet that would be useful to like spot check, double check is from the demographics presentation that gave that little matrix that talked about the intras and intra-districts. The summary on the bottom, intra-ins and inter-ins are total combined for the in column, and the outs are total right there, giving you the net, right? Just the difference between those two. And so then you look at the 25-26 enrollment and you give it a score if it has a positive intra-district or inter-district transfer. And so it gets a 1 if it's a yes, if it has a positive, and a 2, you know it's a negative intra-district transfer. And then ranking is you're giving the highest rank to the school with the lowest percentage of transfers. So just take this in for a moment because this is a lot. And Ken, I might need you to chime in here. Essentially, let's take a look at like Elmhurst, for example, right? It's ranking number 17. If you look at the data, you have 373 outs and 90 ins, correct? And the flip side of it is Mound, which it's a non-boundary school, so they're all ins, right? There's no outs. So, and as we go through this data for this specific criteria, this criteria and the next to follow may work for some schools, may not work for some schools, right? As you look at the high schools, the only high schools that are on this matrix right now, since one is not being considered, Foothill, El Camino, and Pacific, well, they're all non-boundary schools, right? So this specific criteria doesn't work for this category, but it still provides pretty good information for what's happening at the other schools, other campuses. So for the middle schools, you have Anacapa, you have 387 outs, 259 ins. Balboa, 374 outs, 211 in. And then Dianza. So each criteria like changes for a school. Like they're all coming in somewhat different. As we go through the criteria, the 24, there may be some pattern emerges where some schools come more often than the next. But that's what this committee would have to take into consideration. I would say this committee would take a look at all the criteria and take a look at each criteria individually, and then this committee would decide which criteria to put more weight on than the other when making recommendations. And hopefully by the end of this process, try to keep track and provide a summary page to this committee, like, hey, this is, so you don't have to keep flipping back to all the criteria. You'll get, the hope is that we can provide a summary page that, look, as we run through each criteria, this is where the schools well, and that way when you guys are discussing, potentially making recommendations, you'll have that at your fingertips. Like, well, why did let's say Elmhurst rank high on this? Well, let's go take a look at the criteria. Oh, it had low enrollment, or oh, it had a lot of transfers, and so forth.
I need your report. I can't see.
I have just one issue with a couple of these. As Mound and the other high schools, I feel like putting a 0 there is misleading. I don't feel like we should be having a score there because there's not an opportunity for anybody to leave there, and it's misleading to the individuals who don't know that.
Yeah, I actually kind of wondered the same thing, like how would it affect? I mean, we can determine what the effect is, but if we put zeros on the scores for those schools where it clearly is irrelevant data,
Yeah, we
is that wiser?
like just put an NA, like
Yeah.
this criteria
Yeah.
doesn't work for these schools because they're there's no boundary. We can do that.
Okay, Andrea, I'm sorry.
I don't know if we're gonna be talking about, I don't remember, different programs at different schools at some point, but something that jumped out at me is that Cabrillo Middle School, a huge number of transfers in. And I know a lot of, there was a lot of clamor around my kids at Ventura Charter School saying, oh, everybody's going there, I wanna go there. Are we gonna be discussing any of those kinds of issues about
Yeah,
why certain
so
schools are popular?
when, yes, so that's part of Ed Services presentation. They'll have each individual school breakdown of what special programs they offer. And yeah, so that'll come later on.
That's actually in June. We marked that page because thinking that might be a question about when are we going to talk about everything. So in June, we'll be talking about Ed Services.
So when Ed Services presents, they'll present, assuming with the list of like each school site and what makes it special, what programs it has, and then they'll also be discussing is this program relocatable or not.
I'm sorry.
So would we make that decision to put the zeros now?
I mean, yeah.
Oh, is that your question, Stacy?
Well, no, my question was, can we please take Mound out of the ranking then? If it's not being held to the same standard as the other schools that are being ranked. I don't think it matters at the bottom with the high schools because they're all a number one, but I'm curious to see how it would shift everything just because it doesn't hold the same criteria as the other schools.
It's only not working for this specific criteria, but for all other criteria, now and the other schools work. And so taking it completely out, I don't know, I don't think that's a good idea.
I wasn't thinking all the way out.
Oh, just from this criteria?
Correct.
But it would still, everything would still follow the same rank, even because it's
Yeah.
one. So everything would just drop down one, so it wouldn't
Yeah.
really matter anyway, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that. I think it wouldn't change the ranking. The ranking would stay the same. I just want to look back. It seems like we agreed that for Mound, Foothill, El Camino, and Pacific, given that the outs are zeros, we're gonna place an NA in those columns. We will, however, Asan and I meet with our school services California consultants. I don't want to completely dismiss the idea, but I think right now it would be, I don't want to say dangerous, but we may be making it prematurely to know like what is the interplay between the rankings later on. But we'll bring it to their attention and get back. Okay, thank you.
Right, but it could also be part of the summary, that,
Yes.
just as a reminder.
And we could have an asterisk.
Asterisk,
but,
yeah.
So yes, yeah, we'll put it in. And so as we move to the next criteria, actually, if everyone's ready, it's just taking a, sorry.
Thanks, Sarah.
For back to the mound, it would then impact the right, there still would the adjusted in and out, where the outs would be removed.
Are you talking about a different criteria? Yeah.
I'll come back to you.
Essentially, it'll just drop the ranking stays the same because now it's number one because it has 100% or because there's no transfer outs. But yeah, if we the next criteria is pretty similar. It just takes a different lens. And so when we get to that criteria, you'll see that I had put NAs on Mound and the high schools because this criteria didn't work. And so the criteria 5 is if the district decided to exclude intra-district transfers, and it takes a look at what would that, so like for instance, Atlas, 31-32 projected enrollment is 382. If the district no longer had intras and intra-district transfers, their projected enrollment actually would increase to 429. And so what this criteria is taking a look at is, okay, if we didn't have those inters and intras, what would their projected enrollment be? And still taking a look at seeing, do they have excess capacity at that site, looking at the permanent capacity. So it's just a different lens.
To clarify, what this means that no school of choice and not allowing those.
Essentially, I'm not saying that.
I know you're not, that helps the rest of us figure out
But
what we're
essentially,
talking about.
You're saying.
Because we do talk about school of choice separate sometimes for interest, so I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
It's just a different lens. I don't know if that's reality, but that's just what this criteria is.
So if everybody went to the school in the boundary area where they lived.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's taking a look at, what's their permanent capacity? Do they, even with the increase or maybe decrease of enrollment, do they have excess capacity, and ranking it accordingly? And so as I was going through it, I was like, well, if you look at Mound, they would have 0 students because there is no boundary. And so it doesn't work.
Thank you for clarifying that.
I want to make an explicit connection here. There have been, I know that I've received, I'm sure some of you have probably received this just broad question, which is like, well, can the committee consider like what the district would look like, and just fill in the blank, right? This is one of those data sheets that helps the committee think broadly. Well, what would happen if we changed our school of choice policy? And I just want to take that moment to say although that is the imagination portion of that is within the committee to explore, the part that you can't determine is whether that would happen or not, right? That's a board decision. And then also with that come an array of other things, like for example, we have our director of transportation in the back. We will get into transportation numbers as well. There are like just the policies that come with that. So that's why this kind of data set is there for you to be thinking about, well, what would happen if? This allows you to have some data to just be able to imagine that if we didn't have school of choice, here's one way that could look. But that's still, that determination is outside the scope of the community.
Yeah, this is a lot of data, so if questions come up later on as you guys are at home, please feel free to reach out. It's a lot to digest, and we're happy to answer any question. If we don't know, we'll try to find the answers. We've been emailing back and forth as people have been emailing about committee email. And so if you don't have questions now, don't be shy, just email us.
We feel comfortable moving on? Yeah, thank you for the thumbs up. Okay.
Okay, so criteria 6, last criteria for tonight. So we'll start with the sheet here. What is it telling us here? So Atlas, since it's the first one, I keep saying Atlas, but that's giving you the excess capacity for that specific school site, and that's that number. And then you have the cells that are highlighted in green are the 3 closest schools to Atlas, correct? So And those are miles, like 0.9 miles, 12.6 miles, and the ones that are highlighted in salmon color, orange, whatever you want to call that, is the furthest away from that specific school site. And so for Atlas, Citrus Glen, Juana Maria, J. Sarah are the closest schools. And if you scroll over to the second page, I believe you guys have on that. So we're just following the example of Atlas right now, right? So it's the first one, that column right there where it says total excess capacity, 668. That is the excess capacity to the 3 nearest schools. So for Atlas, the 3 nearest schools are Citrus Glen, Juana Maria, and J. Sarah. So as you look at the column all the way on the left where the excess capacity is, if you add up Citrus Glen, Juana Maria, and J. Sarah's excess capacity, it's taking a look at projected enrollment at 3132 for Atlas is 382. Can the 3 nearest schools absorb those students?
And is the answer yes or no?
Yeah, well, yes.
So, is that what would be left over if they absorb those students?
No, so that's saying at fiscal year 31-32, Atlas is projected to have 382 students. The 3 nearest schools have excess capacity of 668, so they'll be able to absorb all of those students.
So a 2 means they can absorb, a 1 means they cannot?
Yes, a 2 means
The
yes.
3 nearest schools could
Oh,
absorb.
that's a second.
Yeah, I think it's confusing if you take that second part and like just attach it to the right-hand side of the long spreadsheet, then it makes a little bit more sense. Yeah, or quickly jot in the names of the schools next to the second page columns. Then I think it's easier to follow that way. They are attached, but the page just isn't long enough.
Yeah, we apologize. When we post this, we will add a column to the left with all the school names, so that way we don't have to read it back.
You could, is there any way we could blow that?
Right, I had it blown up, I was just showing you what you were trying to show.
Use this.
That's the best I can do, because they're actually gonna be able to see it in the back.
All right, so yeah, essentially, that's what it's, so if you just take a look at a couple of ones that have 1, right? The ones that have 1, meaning that specific school site, so the next one that has a 1 is, let's see, it is Elmhurst, right? Elmhurst has the 3 nearest schools to Elmhurst are Loma Vista, Mound, and Poinsettia. The total excess capacity for those 3 sites are 216. Projected enrollment for Elmhurst in 31-32 is 403. So they do not have enough, right? So those 3 schools don't have enough capacity to absorb those students. And so that's why it's at 1. And then the ranking is, the highest rank goes to the school with the closest 3 schools with the highest total capacity available. So if you look at, well, yeah, the one that's ranked the highest is Atlas, because the 3 nearest schools have a capacity of 668.
And again, referring to the K-8 schools, this chart does not include the 6th, 7th, 8th graders. Is that correct? In the total.
It's not looking at enrollment here, it's looking at
For capacity?
Your capacity, and then the projected enrollment, K-8 it's a total projected capacity, total projected enrollment for that.
It does include 6, 7,
It includes 6, 7, 8
yes,
in
yes.
the enrollment, okay.
And so for the middle schools, I did just 2. So since we have limited choices for the middle schools, like if you look at the cells that are shaded, So for Anacapa, the two closest schools to Anacapa is Balboa and Cabrillo. And for Balboa, the two closest schools are Anacapa and Cabrillo and so forth. You have the excess capacity for those specific schools listed on the left-hand column. And then if you look at the way scoring and ranking is, the two closest schools, Anacapa, Balboa, and Cabrillo, they have the excess capacity of 1582. Anacapa has a projected enrollment 3132 of 548. So it scored a 2, meaning it does have capacity, those three schools, and that's how the ranking fell. You're looking at the highest, the three nearest schools with the highest excess capacity. Anacapa ranked 4, and I believe it's Balboa, and then Ganza, and Cabrillo.
Should Cabrillo have a 1?
Cabrillo it does have a 1.
For score?
Score has a 2.
For score, it has a 2.
Right, but
But I think you're right. I think the total excess capacity is 924, and the enrollment is 935, so it should be a 1. Yes.
6.
Would that be the same with Will Rogers? Should it also be a 1? Creating and receiving. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that correct?
You said Will Rogers, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Will Rogers should be a 1, and
Poinsettia, I can count. The 1093 with 3335.
That should be a 1.
Poinsettia, so that should be a 1.
So as we, so this is the first 6 criteria that we're presenting tonight. Like I said, if the committee has questions, please feel, you can email me directly, email Vicki, or that school closures committee, and we'll try to get the answers back to you, and then if it's, we'll bring it back to the committee. I don't know if anybody mentioned, so we had an email about the ethnicity and race slides that you guys provided last time. Somebody noticed and pointed out that the totals didn't equate to 100%. So when we went back and looked at what was printed out, we were missing 2 columns were cut off. So the columns that were missing were 2 or more races and declined to answer or missing. Like those are families that declined to state their races. And so, I mean, overall, it doesn't change the demographic or the ethnicity of what you were given, but we just wanted to make sure you guys had the accurate information. So we should have Vicki reprinted.
Are we still looking at criteria 6? I'm just giving you again a little wave, just a bit more time on this one. Okay, it looks like then we've had enough numbers for one night, maybe. I want to thank you all for being so attentive to this much data and this many numbers all in one stretch. So thank you. Yeah, okay. We've mentioned the Ed Services criteria meeting focus on Ed Services will be in June. Next month, in May, will be a focus on the facilities, the sites themselves, and the master plan. When was the master plan ready?
Sorry, repeat the question.
The master plan, what is the master plan was written?
So the long range facilities master plan, which was facilities haven't done an answer.
Okay.
They'll give you the exact date,
Okay.
but
But that will be the focus of our next meeting.
So the next meeting, we'll be going through criteria 7 through, I believe, 12. 7 through, actually 7 through 13. And so criteria 7 goes over the facilities are in good condition. We're taking a look at the FIT, which is our facilities inspection tool that we get every year, and how did they rate our school sites, good, fair, and poor, and we score them 1 or 2 accordingly. And then we'll take a look at the time that they did the long-range master plan, what were the estimated facility needs costs for each school at that time. And so that's one area. Then we'll look at recent completed bond projects. So we have a bond that passed, how much money was spent at which school, and Ryan will be here, our bond program manager, to talk about what was done at each site, and we can take a look at that accordingly. You'll also get a historical investment in facilities. So we contacted the Division of State Architect. They were able to provide us the previous bond, what was done and how much was spent at each school site. So we'll take a look at that. They'll take a look at maybe what's unique about each facility. They'll be able to talk about, okay, this specific site has this something special here compared to another. We'll take a look at support spaces, and then you'll see if there are any environmental factors, maybe the fault lines, or any water lines, at all of our sites. And then you'll take a look at leases as well. Leases, rentals for all of our sites. What sites are, what income we're generating from leases, what are some of our expenses at our sites. So all about facilities.
Kristen, it starts with a K. I beg your pardon, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be saucy. I'll wear my driving glasses next time.
Okay. This is a question I had a teacher ask me if they want to give input. I know there's the first 20 minutes, but is there an email or a way that staff and teachers can input?
That would be the same VUSD school closures email address that we've given out. So every time we do the summary or we put in the newsletter, which we also send the staff, that will be there.
Okay, so just tell them to.
Everybody can send anything they want there. The other place would be those that will ultimately making the decision. They can also email the board. Either way.
I just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
So then the final order of business for tonight is the adjournment. I guess we need a motion and a second for that. So we move to adjourn.
Was that Carol? Carol, so moved.
Okay, thank you. And second,
Melanie.
okay, thank you. And a roll call vote on that?
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice evening. Thank you again for your commitment to this important cause.
Not with healthy, she's a